Welcome back. This is episode 3 now of the cutting room lore. Should we just get into it, Nick?
Well, what happened last time?
So last time was we recapped basically everything from you guys meeting the dwarfs outside of Drellin's Ferry, the battle at the city or the abandoned city of Rest, the kind of confrontation with the blue spear, and then the entire kind of climactic battle of the arc at Brindol.
Yeah, and we do have some notes. Our helpful commentator gave us a few notes about that upon listening to our previous episode. Apparently, we did know the name of the Blue Spear all along, except we didn't. I'm role-playing Blum. I don't fucking know his name, and I'm not sorry.
Yeah. While Seb's wonderful editing notes are very useful. We're not going to get everything.
No, I mean, do you remember the name of the guy?
I had it in my notes. It is deep in a binded folder somewhere. Long forgotten. Yeah.
So the only person who really was paying attention was Seb when it came to that.
But to be fair, he'll make the note and then he'll write it in his notes and then never look at it.
Yeah.
Until after the campaign.
Yeah.
But to be fair, at least there's one person in the party taking notes.
That's true. Got notes. I this is my sort of approach to note taking now. Is I like to play idiots because it means that I have an RP reason to not know anything.
See, that's fair. But what's the rest of the excuses?
Yeah. Oh, you're playing a wizard. Better be prepared to take notes if you're high int, bro.
I think that's a little bit why. I tried last campaign to whenever you guys were like, oh, I don't know a name, just to go, well, you should have wrote it in your notes. But the issue was that got to the point where it was every NPC.
Yeah.
So we have now NPC chats in the Discord, and that started to make it easier for you guys to keep notes.
Thank goodness too, because the amount of times we've had to sort of look back and go, yes, you. Thank you so much for your help.
Scroll, find the picture of the NPC, read name.
Generic European man, number 5. Tim, yes.
Tim, son of Tim.
Yeah. Tim, son of Timothy, grandson of Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, off on a tangent. We left off last time talking about the aftermath of Brindol.
Yes.
I think we briefly mentioned the absolute devastation caused by Gronk and the acquiring of the belt, the legendary belt, that he was not so easily parted with. Blum's sort of semi-enlightenment, and a little bit of a class change, taking some druid levels.
Yeah.
And of course, this is when Fahad left the party.
Yep.
Only a guest appearance.
So he kind of rode his chariot off into the sunset.
Yeah. Thankfully, not with a bunch of the party's loot.
Yeah, a slight benefit.
Yeah, common courtesy, really.
He kind of broke the mold of guy rocks up, puts boss monster in a headlock, takes all loot, fucks off.
Refuses to elaborate.
Yeah. So this time he didn't just rob the party. But yeah, after that, I think you guys were given this kind of dying wish that none of you acted upon to hunt down this wounded dragon, which does come a little bit back to bite you guys at the end of the story.
I mean, a bit. To be fair, we had bad experiences. I mean, Blum in particular had a bad experience with a dragon before.
Yes.
Not only betrayed, also killed.
Yeah. The guard transforming into a green dragon and then turning on you really left a sour taste.
I think it did. I suspect Blum, now that he's sort of a full druid later on.
Mhm.
I reckon he probably still doesn't like the color green because of it. And so all of his gardens and stuff are all like yellow or like
Just bright
brown
pink
bark and
flowers.
stuff. Yeah. He's like
Uh,
not a big fan of big green jungles.
sees a hedge, just
Ah!
uh,
His
yeah.
favorite season is like autumn and winter.
He just doesn't trust the green anymore. He thinks
Yeah.
every bush
Spring,
is a
worst
mimic.
time of year. Goes into hibernation.
But
Um,
yeah, after this, you guys then kind of head back to the Green Mountain Vale to kind of report your astounding success to the head of the Penya here, this kind of owl guy.
yeah, we were heading back, and then on the way, now I was a bit fuzzy on this because I missed one of the sessions around this time. Can't remember exactly when it was,
Yeah.
but it was around this time. And on the way to the Scar, Krem, I believe it didn't it start with the coin returning.
Yes, yes. So it was the first night after the Brindol arc. Krem kind of fell asleep, and he had a small little dream where he was approached by kind of a masked figure who offered him the coin back. Krem, being the coin addicted freak that he was like, "Yes, please," and he grabbed it immediately.
Yeah.
And that kind of gave the entryway for me to kind of start as a DM messing with him as the Dark One, or via the Dark One's powers. And then I think it was the second night, once you guys arrived in the kind of the mountains of the Scar, just before you reached the Green Mountain Vale, that Krem had a vision that his brother was being tortured, or at least held prisoner, in Voluthir, which is this kind of elven city at the center of the Scar that was kind of cursed and abandoned after this great calamity.
Yes. And there was a certain debate over whether to go in to rescue him, but I was not privy to that. This was the part where I was actually gone.
Yeah.
And
so I think we had about a session, maybe two, of just in character arguing.
yeah,
No combat, no travel, just making a decision. And the kind of the decisions were go to the Penya here, ask for help, try and find a solution, or head down and kind of go back to the Racian Kingdom and try and figure out what was going on there. And I believe you guys had some. At this point, Thexan had learned that Huron Fairhair and had heard about Huron Fairhair, who we'll kind of cover in his own episode. Because I think before we kind of move towards the later part, especially the last arc of the campaign, it's important that we just kind of fully cover Huron's story. But basically, there was the MacGuffin item that was Huron's sword. That was the weapon last used to defeat the Dark One. And so one of the options, which Thexan kind of argued for quite heavily, was, hey, let's go find this tomb, let's take this sword, and then maybe we can free Krem's brother after we get it.
Yeah.
Krem was having none of this.
No.
And Krem was like, if we leave him this long, my brother's going to die.
I mean, it was a fair point. Leaving him in, the Trollocs, the Hobgoblins, everything that we'd seen so far was bodies turned inside out and hung on drying racks to turn into rugs. So it was a very fair worry that Krem's brother would not be alive if we missed this opportunity. The problem was that if we went in, the only way out that we know of was back up the way we came through the mountains. So out of a valley, uphill, in the mountain times, surrounded on all sides by an enormous, enormous army, right in the heart of our BBEG's territory.
Yeah, and from what you guys were gathering, like, this was kind of in effect, like, Cold Mordor. And so
Cold Mordor, certain death. Not even with a Mount Doom to get us out, there's no sort of this MacGuffin will kill all the enemies for us.
And so basically the party have a vote, and they decide that they're going to perform this kind of charge and quest just directly into Volithyr,
Yes.
which we have now dubbed the Charge of the Not So Bright Brigade.
Yeah.
But at the time, was mostly just kind of
Certain
met
death.
with certain death. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
There are
started
quite a few memes looking back about Kriem, Olga, and Grunk heading straight into certain death. My favorite of which is, I think, posted by you, the Batman slapping Robin, Thexan asking if it's certain death. And just, yes, bam.
and it was this 2-session long argument, and it culminated in an in-person session, which is rare for us, where I think everyone was down except from you were up in Lincoln, so far away from London, and so we had this kind of in-person session, which even then started with 10 minutes of just arguing over Seb arguing, guys, don't do it, please, I don't want to die, guys, if we do that, the world's fucked, like, please, we need to stop doing this, but no one was being dissuaded, and so you guys kind of entered into this passageway. Now, the route that you guys took was through the kind of western most settlement of the Green Mountain Vale, which took you guys into this kind of like narrow passageway. And can you remember much, Nick, from that?
Not a whole lot. What I do remember is when I rejoined the party, that was sort of after the three had set off. Mm-hmm. You know, the three most led by their hearts rather than their heads. I remember Seb messaging me saying, "You need to stop them. They're going to die." But then Blum ended up agreeing with them and going with them.
Yeah. And so Thexan was kind of just forced to come along, knowing this decision was a bad one. Yes. And this is when we meet another guest character, the absolute Giga Chad that was Jimothy LaRock.
Yes.
Jimothy LaRock didn't say much. He just kind of appeared and was like, "Yes, I am willing to help." And he was played by kind of a group friend, Seb's friend Jimmy, it was fun. He just kind of rocked up, didn't say much, but kept doing epic things.
He was tremendously helpful, and then vanished completely.
Yeah, especially because the first fight that you had was another monster that I'd seen in the kind of Kibbles. The Kobold Press 5e kind of monster book, which was in effect like a rock shape-shifting giant. Rock being ROC, the giant bird.
Not just giant, like titanic.
Yeah, and you guys were kind of heading into this path. It was really quite snowy, and you see this massive fuck-off bird approaching you. Yeah, and I think this fight ensues, and the first moment we really get to know. I've just seen the meme that you've posted, and I'll put it up. Yes, it was very much of this giant rocked up, or this giant bird rocked up, and immediately transforms into a giant halfway through the combat. Yeah, and you were all very confused.
We were confused and we were shitting ourselves. There were people yelling. We had not great coordination. I think for that fight.
And the entire time this is happening, kind of chaos is ensuing. You guys are getting quite low. This was kind of a deadly encounter. And then Jimothy LaRock just appears on his turn and just hurls just a magical spear straight through this thing's chest.
Yeah.
And that was kind of your guys' first encounter with him as like in a combat sense. And that did leave an impression. And so the kind of the Giga Chad Jimothy meme began. And then kind of moving through there, you encountered a dark elf, a drow.
We did. Now, our reaction to this was sour, to say the least. You know, the party's encounters with elves had so far been meeting a bunch of dead elves where we had weird hallucinations in a cave, and meeting an elf that was resurrected atop a pile of bones and tried to kill us. So I think we were all a little apprehensive.
Yeah, and there was a certain elfist attitude among the party, and you didn't trust this person initially, but after they kind of convinced you to follow them, they helped guide you through a path that was slightly less dangerous, and
Yeah.
you guys, I believe some of you guys got talking with this elf. Do you remember any of the information that was imparted?
Absolutely not. Could you elaborate what I might have missed?
So basically, these elves were like, in terms of appearance, they looked like they were dark elves and they're drow, but they had kind of Inuit inspired culture. They were kind of these roving bands of elves that would guard the outskirts of Voluthere against forces of the Dark One as best they could, because for whatever reason, I'm not going to go into spoilers. I kind of want to leave it a mystery. They weren't affected by the general curse that the Dark One had over elves during that period, and that was that most elves that kind of appeared and landed on the continent of Restria, because of how tainted Voluthere was, would inevitably become tainted in some way, and would grow.
Is that because of the infection of the source, or is it because perhaps of an elf's involvement in the cataclysm eons before?
It was more so an involvement with the cataclysm.
I see.
And it was almost like there's kind of elements. So like in Warhammer 40k,
I was just about to say I'm getting a lot of parallels to Warhammer.
There was a especially with the Blood Angels, they have this kind of psychic disease almost that is caused by the death of their Primarch, and it's kind of this visions of the past, and because their Primarch was so psychically powerful, they have that kind of inbuilt kind of disposition that can kind of befall them.
And it's like a sort of like a psychic wave that's still passing through them even eons later. Exactly.
And so the Dark Elves were immune to this for quote unquote law reasons.
Let's see. Yeah.
And I wanted to give this kind of at this point, because I wasn't sure in terms of like player characters whether you guys like want to make it through. I wanted to introduce the possibility of allowing you guys to play an elf if, say, we got a TPK.
Of course. This was the first opportunity that you actually gave us the option to play an elf, of which I don't think any of us really did. But
no,
even now, I don't think any of us have played an elf yet. Because elves are cringe.
Yeah, that, and you guys all now just as players have a hatred for them because of last campaign.
Yeah, but it's surprising that none of us have played a dwarf as well. Yeah, we've all been pretty hummy, which is a little strange for us.
Yeah, but I feel like because of the kind of the different types of cultures you have on this continent, you guys can all play humans, and it can feel very different. But that was the first opportunity you could play as an elf. And this is when you guys then enter into kind of Voluthere proper. And you get your first sighting of a mithril drake.
Yeah, this is the proper sort of charge into the middle. This is where the sort of like proper light brigade mad dash to the exit really kicks in. Because that dragon, mithril dragon. Now, was that from one of the other source books you had?
Yes. So again, it was from the kind of the Kobold Press book, and I was like thumbing through it, and I'm gonna admit it, I'm a DM who loves dragons. I'll try and stick a couple in every campaign I get, just because I love running them. I think they're so cool in terms of what you can do with them, and thematically they're quite cool and prominent to just high fantasy. So I'm like, stick a dragon in. They're good fun.
Something I have been meaning to ask you actually about dragons, because I know that you put lots of dragons in. Is there a parallel? Because in sort of normal D&D settings, there is a sort of moral disposition between chromatic and metallic dragons. Is that also true in your world?
I don't think so. So in this case, like a mithril dragon is technically metallic, so should be good. But this mithril dragon was clearly not.
Yeah.
And I think that with dragons, I wanted to kind of have them be their own entities and have their own personalities, regardless of whatever kind of color their scales are. So I like the idea that they're all kind of rogue agents for their own beliefs and kind of what their own needs are. So you can have you can have like a black dragon that wants to protect a swamp or protect an area or protect a community of people. But you could have like metallic dragons that are just evil.
And it makes sense. Sort of metallic dragons look, I imagine, pretty intimidating as these sort of huge lumps of, almost armor on such a massive body.
Yeah, and again, just because I know I'm going to use dragons later at some point, it gives me the option to, if I decide I want to have a dragon that looks evil and is maybe copper, boom, I can make the scales copper if I want. Especially as we kind of get into other aspects. I think there was another dragon that you guys saw earlier that was this kind of black and red scaled dragon. Who gave you guys some advice or some visions beforehand.
We missed that entirely, and it should have been episode 1 where we encountered the boiling lake. But although, it's funny because that was a really sort of like heavy RP, quite like emotional moment for Jonah. But Thexan missed it. Lots of the party missed it. Like it sort of went on deaf ears, really.
Yeah. And there was also some big like lore drops that were just kind of ignored. But
so I think in that sort of in keeping with that theme, we too have ignored it.
Yeah, just completely forgot it.
Yeah.
The only important part, Smokey Joe.
Joe. Yeah, I can't believe we missed Smokey Joe. A homeless man trying to build a spaceship gave us passage over the boiling lake. And that's not the last time we'd see him, of course.
No. Whenever Smokey Joe appears whenever there's a body of water needing to be crossed.
Yeah. We actually met him on the other side of the mountain range on our way to Brindol. Upon leaving the sort of dragon bridge where Blum died, we found Smokey Joe again, and he gave us the boat ride back to Brindol.
He's an incredibly powerful being.
We did sort of talk about, could Smokey Joe be a Warlock patron for campaign 2?
The option was on the table. I don't think anyone picked it up just yet.
Not that we know of.
But yeah, you guys see this this kind of mithril drake that at this point you guys had heard whispers about, that there was this kind of extremely powerful drake roaming around the Scar, that had seemingly kind of roamed around the abandoned settlement of Voluthere. And you guys decide, rather brazenly to charge at it. And that went okay. Surprisingly.
It went okay, I think is just about the best way to describe that. It was a mad dash through, and we did make it to Kriem's brother, and he was alive.
Yeah. And it was, you guys, well, I mean, just going, I guess, to the fight, you guys were approaching Voluthere from this kind of mountain passage. And as you entered the city, or about to enter the city, there was this large lake of frozen ice. And you kind of made this mad dash across it. The dragon noticed you, and you guys all then begin to fight. I think the kind of the highlights of that moment was Blum hit him with a dragon slaying arrow, which is a huge chunk of damage, and then Lorena kind of erupting earthed the ice to break it through and begin to pull the Drake down. Gronk inevitably hit some big boy damage smites.
Yes.
And then again, in almost like his second Giga Chad moment, Jimothy the Rock kills the Drake.
Yep. I mean, what a way to like just come in for one session, kill a huge dragon after like this round of amazing rolls, and then just get the kill.
Yeah, and I think this is the moment that kind of broke me a little bit as a DM.
Yes, you had a bit of a crisis after that.
Because what I saw that unfolded just broke me internally. To have an in-person session and then to pull out this epic ancient dragon, I was really happy. I was like, you know what? I've told him this is certain death. It's time to deliver on the goods. And then you guys roll 7
certain death threats have been certain death all of one time.
Yeah, and then I just see as the people at the table roll 7 nat 20s in a row in front of me.
It's truly astounding.
Yeah, and it was just painful, especially because, and I'll show you guys. I painted up a miniature directly for it. I'd done like a resin pour to show the ice, and it looked stunning. And then this thing had just kind of died in a rather sad whimper.
And it was what, like 3 rounds?
Oh yeah, it was unbelievably short. You guys dished out close to 300 damage like that,
and we were only what level 9?
Yeah, you were level 9. It doesn't make sense. Okay, I don't understand how you guys killed this thing so quickly.
But regardless, once it was dead, I mean, the Trollocs were sort of like, they weren't actively fighting with us. They were more like the Fortnite barrier, slowly closing in.
Largely because I think I wanted them to feel, inevitably, like I wanted you guys to feel like this was a situation where if you decide to stay and fight, you would inevitably lose. Because there are just too many. There are too many choices. This is their home hub. So your best option.
And if we actually entered combat, there's a risk that we might survive and get out or kill them all. Going by the previous session.
That too. And so kind of like that, and coupled with if we did go into actual combat, getting from one side of the city to the other would take like 8 sessions.
It would. It would take days of our lives.
Yeah. So we kind of just, that was the approach we took. You guys were kind of darting through abandoned city streets, which for a lot of you guys you had seen before from visions or dreams. And then you guys arrive and you see this horrific thing taunting Kriem's brother. And this thing is it was this like faceless creature, a little bit like a Fade or a Murdral from the Wheel of Time, but it had this unique ability where its limbs would kind of grow and extend but in doing so would horrifically crack and stretch, and you could hear the sound of sinew popping and joints being pushed out of place as it did so. And you guys, rather sensibly, after the incident with the dragon fight and having taken a bit of damage, just grabbed Kriem's brother and then left.
Yeah, we ran straight out.
Yeah, and so you then kind of head off, run through, and are actually told by Kriem's brother that the way that he entered was a waygate. And he points you in the right direction. You arrive at the waygate, and this waygate then takes you back to the Greenhold.
Yes. So we we went through that sort of waygate heading back to where we started. So it's this long journey, finally coming back around to the place where it all began. Although I think this was the moment when you took a little break. Or perhaps it might have been just after this and I did a one-shot. Which we will come to either at the end of this session or the start of the next one.
Yeah.
Because it had a few implications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had Seb rejoining the party after his sort of time away. And relentless jokes. Here's one down memory lane. Yeah, I was born in Greenhold, but I was made in the Axiom Royal Navy. Yeah. Wow. So, you know, that was quite a sort of hectic time because we had the escape from the Scar. We had a successful rescue, which was something that we haven't pulled off yet. Everyone's always died. We discovered the Waygates, big implication for the world, and massively important later on.
Yeah.
So the sort of sub-dimension, you know, as I understand it, heavily inspired by both the Wheel of Time's ways as well as something like the Webway from 40K.
Yeah. Very similar. I wanted, again, it's a very good way, just as a writer, which is why Robert Jordan, I imagine, uses it, to have a way of getting your players from point A to point B, especially if you've got a world where, or a campaign where you've got things happening with big implications throughout the entire world and the history of the entire world. It just makes sense that you have this way of fast traveling almost.
We had not unlocked fast travel, not yet. That came later.
Yes, yeah.
But it certainly implied a sort of grander network.
Yeah. And it is one that we still have yet to kind of explore in the new campaign.
Although we will talk about that a bit when we come to my technically third character in the second campaign, Poacher, who he's very linked to the Ways.
Yeah, his backstory is very centered around that, the mystery and unraveling it. But just before we get to the kind of the events of the one shot, there was a session actually that you missed.
Yes, no, that's right. That's why I must have said that there was nothing there. It's because I wasn't there. And this was, oh my god, what a session to fucking miss!
Yeah, you arrived back at Greenhold, and I told the rest of the party that as they did so, they felt this kind of weird thing pulling at them as they exited the waygate. They felt this kind of heavy fog or sense of something not feeling quite right. And they arrive back in Greenhold, and everything seems different. The town is really quiet. People aren't coming out to greet them. They're watching them from behind closed doors. And these are all people that they've grown up with in a small, isolated town. So there really isn't much of an excuse for why they'd be doing this. And then it hits them. as they turn around and go towards Lorinna's home, the inn, they see the body of Jonah hanging there, suspended above the front door. And I think at this point, something inside Thexan, whatever kind of childlike curiosity or innocence, breaks. And he sees that his father has been killed. As they enter the tavern, looking for answers, you guys see a group of white cloaks and kind of Pertolovian theocracy priests sitting at a table, drinking and laughing, as Lorinna's father is there serving at the bar. And it's during this that Thexan overhears a statement being made that they were the group that had executed Jonah's father. Jonah, for being a magic user, being someone that had kind of eloped and married a Penya here. And Thexan didn't take this well, and so the whole party effectively ambushed these guards or these priests in the tavern. Thexan starts it all off by running the main one through with his sword, and Lorinna casts, I think, Fireball.
Yes.
Inside her own family home.
Yep.
That is made of wood.
Yep.
And that set on fire immediately. And the party were kind of left after just killing all these people outside, dealing with the kind of the events that had just transpired and the death of Jonah. And it was after this that the party then buried Jonah and went to Thexan's own home, which he found was burnt down. And they had this kind of small funeral for this character that had passed. I think it is fair now to say, spoiler alert, Jonah didn't die.
No, he wasn't dead.
Wasn't Jonah. This was a trick played by the Dark One in an attempt to break or start to turn Thexan to his own nefarious means. The idea, yeah.
So sort of, was this an illusion that only Thexan was seeing and sort of the rest of the party was just sort of not doing what they described and it was sort of in Thexan's head? Or was this like an illusion that affected all of the party? It was a real person, but it wasn't Jonah.
So it wasn't necessarily an illusion. It was more so a physical change to this thing. So the entity that you had encountered earlier in Voluthir, this thing that could change its arms and rapidly
I see.
Yeah,
a shapeshifter.
Exactly. What it had done is it had taken someone and changed their face to look exactly like Jonah's. And then they had orchestrated this thing, spread this rumor around the other villagers, and then led to this guy's hanging. And so Jonah had effectively been hanged. He wasn't Jonah. He just looked like him. And the ruse had been played. But it was a situation where the Dark One had done this, one, to get back at the party, for just kind of getting out of his grasp, but also because his entire ethos and idea was that he wanted the party to turn, but he wanted the party to choose to turn.
Yeah.
And the idea was that if he could force Thexan away from kind of the Pertolovian theocracy and those groups that just outwardly preach against him and are so massively anti-Dark One, he could start to move that needle closer to where Thexan would be willing to make a deal with him.
Yeah, I think it's just like, so long as he wasn't with a group that was specifically anti-magic or anti-magician, because the Dark One seemed to have a lot more influence over those who had magical abilities than those who sort of staunchly rejected them, like the White Cloaks.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of this is where you had, as I understand it, the White Cloaks sort of captured the party.
Yes. So basically, the party then come down, and Thexan's still really annoyed. Then decide to go to the next, like the nearest city that is occupied by the White Cloaks. As at this point the Racian kingdom had fallen, and the Persean theocracy had taken part of what was the kingdom, and the Argian principalities had taken the other. And so you guys arrived at this point and headed towards the kind of the main settlement, and just decided to walk just directly up to the front gate and demand answers.
Yeah.
And that was when they were like, yeah, we'll give you answers, but you need to surrender all your magic items to us, or any weapons that you've got, and then we'll let you in. The idea being that if you did that, the guy would have a conversation with you. Like, not all of these priests were bloodthirsty psychopaths who wanted only to kind of purge the heretic as they saw it. Some of them were reasonable people, and all you had to do in that sense was just kind of give over the items and surrender the weapons for a short period of time, and they would have a quick discussion with you. You could maybe even get some answers. I had prepped in the notes as well that if you guys were convincing enough, he would just straight up tell you who it was that was actually leading to this kind of whoever hung Jonah. Spoiler alert, was Jasper.
Yes. Hang on. Yes. So Jasper, once again, the ghost of Jasper strikes, as we always thought it would. I can't. We didn't actually. I don't believe we actually managed to meet Jasper. He was gone by the time we got there.
Yeah. So effectively, Jasper had kind of he was an up and comer, rising through the ranks. Clearly with his designs not on like the religion, but on what power he could gain from being part of it.
Yeah.
He had done this rather zealously, hung the first person he could, disregarding the fact that it was Jonah, largely because he probably still had a vendetta against Jonah, from like a mild altercation they had early on in the campaign.
Yes, when Jonah refused to hand himself into the police for a bounty that didn't exist. He had a vendetta against him.
Yeah. And so he'd done that, realized he'd messed up and wasn't going to get a promotion, and immediately like left and taken whatever people would follow him. And so yeah, that was the option of what was on the table. But instead, the party decided not to give over their weapons and their items. And then it was only made worse when Lorena cast Cone of Cold at a bunch of these anti-magic plate wearing fighters.
It was pretty instant. As I understand it.
Yeah, it was a quick fight, largely because the armor that these paladins had was completely anti-magic, and they were designed as a kind of a creature, as a stat block, to be really good against mages, but not as good against like fighters or barbarians. So yeah, they were kind of optimally.
They were sort of an inquisition force, but not like a standing army.
Exactly. And it was just largely through the party's own decision that this fight occurred, and they were kind of outnumbered 10 to, I think, 6. And the party were kind of knocked out and captured. And then we had a session following that where it was just kind of one-on-one interrogation sessions.
Yeah.
Where the way that we did it is we had a Discord channel for each one, and we had one that was just the cell, and we had an interrogation room. And I was almost always in the interrogation room. And I would just let you guys, for however long you wanted, just sit and talk as characters and try and come up with a story that made sense, that wouldn't get you in trouble. All the while, I was slowly dragging one of you in to the interrogation room, running you each through the same questions, and then offering you certain things if you gave up another member of the party. And kind of offering you guys plea bargains and deals.
So who gave up who?
So it was pretty clear that Lorena was a mage.
Yeah.
And so Lorena...
I mean, she was the one who openly used magic in front of the guards, so pretty hard to sell the non-mage on that one.
Exactly. And so she was just immediately... We're not even going to question her. She's going to hang unless one of these guys decides to join us. And the lucky thing was... Gronk had left quite an impression on them, largely through the impression of his Warhammer going through 4 of them.
Which they later seemed fine with, because Thexton was getting most of the flack because he was the most resistant in his interrogations. But the Ogier they found very amiable, even though he had killed 3 of them.
Well, this is the thing. He had the Ogier buff.
Yeah, he did. Felix just has that sort of natural disarming charm.
Yeah, and he really leaned into it. And so his deal was effectively him and Holger finally made a deal separately that they would both join the White Cloaks organization, and they both had to make a kind of an oath rod that meant that them as players couldn't break it. So if I as a DM said basically their like code word, their order 66, they would just turn on Lorena and Kriem and just lay them low. And that was the kind of deal that both Gronk and Holger had made, that if the Perso Theocracy ever ordered them to, they would have to immediately kill Lorena and Kriem.
Yeah.
And that was one, if they were told to, or if these people went out of their way to kill other people just completely unwarranted. So not in self-defense, not in a situation where you get yourself into a gladiatorial death match for no reason, where you know you're going to lose. Yeah,
it was sort of a bit of a sort of sort of Damocles hanging over Lorena's neck there, which, it stayed because Holger would sort of periodically remind us about his endless quest to staunch out the heresy. Mm-hmm. But Lorena seemed sort of blissfully unaware or non-caring about the Inquisitor's sort of presence. Even after she came out of the cells, the first thing she did was she went to the smith and asked about the specs of their anti-magic weaponry to a slightly bemused White Cloak.
Yeah, just going up to the head smith and was like, "Hey,
yes,
how does your secret weapon work?"
Yes. So your defenses, any weaknesses? Yeah. The only person that seemed to really struggle in the interrogations was Thexton, who put up the most sort of resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was being very sort of dodgy from questions, didn't want to answer anything. And as far as I was concerned, Thexton was probably the least likely to give another member of the party up.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think Thexton 1 had so much of a distrust for these guys now. Which was, may I just say, masterstroke.
100% warranted. Yeah.
Yeah, genius brain move by the Dark One to sow discontent.
Yeah.
There was no way that Thexton would ally with these guys now. So he kind of...
Well, we say that, but...
if Gronk's a white cloak,
That's
no
true.
worries.
You know, I mean, Thexan did. There was a moment where he might have been persuaded because I remember listening to his interrogation and like his sort of interrogator, he got along with quite well. Yeah. So there was a sort of. It definitely, after the interrogations were over, there definitely wasn't the same sort of relentless quest for revenge that Thexan had previously.
Yeah, exactly. And then that led to the kind of the next big arc, which I think we could probably then talk about your one shot.
Yes, because after we left Greenhold, this was the moment. I believe.
I will say that the interrogator was actually based on a real life person. So there was a story of, I think his name is like Hans Scharf, who was a German World War II like interrogator, who came up with this way of interrogating people by making friends with them. And he would effectively get prisoners of war that were captured and treat them for like walks and ask them about their lives. And by doing that, slowly try and convince them to be like, hey, so where is your airbase? And stuff like that. And the kind of approach was that if this guy could basically butter you up and make you think that you guys were buddy-buddy, he could try and either one, get the truth out of you guys, or convince you guys to join him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, so that, I mean, sinister as hell.
Yeah.
Basing a character off a literal Nazi.
Well, he was evil.
Yeah. no bones about it. No need to worry about it. But yeah,
but I figured what better way to have a character, because ultimately, if the situation was that if you guys had decided to completely deny him, he would kind of lift the mask of nicety off and quickly become a very evil person. I figured, take a bit of inspiration from that and really create a villain.
Yeah.
But I guess I think from this part, do you want to talk a bit about your one shot that you ran?
Yeah. I mean, I do not know where we sort of hosted it, which channel, which chat, even if we did it on Messenger or something. So it could be the remnants of this could be anywhere on our servers. But the idea of this one shot was to sort of be, you know, like it had the option of being canon. So people could come with slightly more diverse characters. You know, I think someone played like a hobgoblin, someone played a triton. You know, we had all sorts, a big mix. Because this was set in the Scar and set in a prison. And we had done sort of a prison break one shot before, which I absolutely loved. So I wanted to do it again. And the idea was that each character had been captured by this Trolloc orc sort of hobgoblin band, this war band of the Dark One.
Yeah.
And was being used as a slave workforce to cut down the trees, build up encampments, and to sort of generally sort of provide manual labor for the building and establishment of this sort of base. The prison was essentially a big pit. It was one hole, and the sides of that hole had been dug down tunnels through, layer by layer.
Yeah.
And each level had something different on. So you had like the sort of canteen level, you had the sort of mining level, you had the cells level, and then up above you had up on the surface, logging and hunting and all this going on. And right at the bottom was a dragon. And because we'd only experienced evil dragons so far, so I wanted to have a good dragon. So the dragon at the bottom, I took inspiration from Harry Potter. It's a weird place to pull from. But if you remember, there was the dragon kept at the bottom of Gringotts, who was like pallid, hadn't seen the sunlight in over like 100 years, almost scaleless and bleeding from the joints because it was so malnourished and so cruelly treated. And so that was sort of what the condition this dragon was in. It had been trapped here for ages and ages, and it was almost feral. It was being fed, dead bodies, orcs, prisoners, and general filth and waste. And our prisoners came in and sort of, in fact, who were you playing during this one shot?
Now, I don't know if I played a character in this one shot.
Oh, were you?
Because I think the reason we held this and the reason why you offered to do the one shot was because I had exams.
I think you still played in it though.
And I think I was maybe there for a session or two.
Yeah, it was something like either 2 or 3 sessions. And
I was either a drunk dwarf or a... I don't know. I can't even remember the character.
Well, we'll have to look it up. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
But basically, there were a series of legendary, sort of mythical artifacts. I say mythical. They're pretty strong. In fact, some of them made a comeback in your campaign later.
Yes.
Yeah, there were some artifacts held by the guards that you could steal. There were various tools that you could make makeshift weaponry and all sorts while you were in your cells. You could plan sort of a riot, which eventually you did do, all the players. And yeah, they sort of conformed this riot and pushed their way up to the surface. And eventually, the players managed to free the dragon at the bottom, and that was sort of a victory condition for me in my notes.
Yeah,
because it's an ancient dragon, and I was treating it like the ancient dragon is so strong enough that there's no point doing a combat. It's just a cutscene. You win.
Yeah.
So they freed the dragon. The dragon was able to assist them in escaping because there was no way they were going to get out of the scar by themselves. And that was actually sort of probably one of the best outcomes that could have happened. I was super ready for and then, in a sort of Fallout, New Vegas style, and the scar was forever changed with the blood you sowed. You all die in misery and agony, laying the foundations for more prisoners. But thankfully, the players managed to get out. In some regards, a lot of it was canon. As the dragon, it renamed itself Liberty after its sort of renewed freedom, and it went off to fly to its sort of ancestral homeland that it remembered. But of course, it has been imprisoned for so long that the landscape has changed. And a lot of the homeland that it remembered is now underwater. So, in fact, in the next one shot that I did much later, the repercussions of that are the players are sent to a place that was part of this old civilization that the dragon is sort of trying to reclaim, but it's almost completely submerged in the ocean.
And that was the one where you guys had that fight underwater with the... I remember hopping into that call and seeing like the tail spire, and there were these kind of portal things built into the base of it.
Yes. Yeah, that was where I tried to bring a bit more of the ways in. Because every time you've given me creative liberty to provide canon, I've tried to add in stuff that I tried to manipulate your world in subtle ways that have they seem small at the time, but they have really important implications. Like the release of an ancient dragon. It's pretty important.
Yeah, that's
the sort of opening of a huge waygate, pretty important. But in ways that sort of they're far enough away, location-wise, they could be ignored by the party at least for 4 campaigns.
yeah.
Yeah, in terms of sort of how canon that was, though, the events could be seen as canon, but not all the characters.
Yes. There was a moment when playing this, there was a character created that really questioned the fabric of the lore itself. That being, who was Megamit Ganji?
Yeah.
And why did he have atomic fists?
Yes, we had Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, do we really need to elaborate why we didn't want that one to really establish itself in the canon?
Yeah.
Calling yourself Joseph Joestar is sort of one thing, but going complete meme doesn't sort of speak to the heart of RP.
Wait, this was who I played. I played Joseph Joestar.
That was right. You played
yes.
a JoJo in that one shot. That's exactly who you played.
And I remember because it was I built him on like a monk that used Hamon. And you gave me these like magic nullifying bracelets. So he was just a really shit monk.
Yeah.
Couldn't do anything.
Yes. Yeah, because all the prisoners were equipped with anti-magic, so the people that had chosen magic, and I hadn't told them beforehand. So everyone that came in with a magic class was totally fucked until like the last part of the game when the shackles were removed, which I found tremendously funny. I don't know how it was to play through.
It was chaotic.
Yeah.
Especially because, as is inevitable in any kind of prison arc, we will inevitably, as prisoners, try and mess with each other.
Yeah.
And inevitably you have 2 characters who spend the first half of the session just beating the shit out of each other in their cell. But no, it was good fun, and I felt like and this is one thing I do like about your kind of like, I wouldn't say one shots because they're more 3 shots, but
yeah,
you expand the lore in a tone and a way that I don't think about when I approach it, and I very often kind of steal from later on. For instance, just more recently because it's fresh in my mind. Your approach to having dwarves speak dwarvish in a way they're just so incoherently Scottish, that you can't make out a word.
Yeah. I remember I was thinking about sort of, okay, so you want to order a beer from a dwarf, but you don't speak Dwarven. I can't order a beer.
Like the beauty of it is it's close enough that you can take a guess.
Yeah, there are words that you can make out. Okay, he's probably talking maybe about this, but if I get this wrong,
big offense being made.
Yeah,
and man, it's always refreshing, especially because I have the notes in my OneNote about everything that happened and the kind of the items that are kicking around. And I've talked with James, who played Kriem, and some of his characters are still kind of operating in the world. So there may be kind of opportunities for, maybe not in this campaign, but the campaign after, or even in this second campaign, for them to reappear and present kind of challenges.
I would be absolutely excited. I mean, it's been so long that I don't think I even remember. I'd have to dig out my notebook where I wrote them down on paper. I didn't even remember what was sort of what the tools were, what the different weaponries that I had offered had been.
There was a lot of kind of magical, like anti-magic shackles, but then also you had these kind of really creative uses to create primitive arcane focuses.
Yeah, well, something I really like the idea of are like one-use magic items, because then you don't, it's sort of you use it, and it can be as powerful as you want because you've only got it that one time.
Yeah. But I think with those, they're kind of a double-edged sword. You have to have them made so that they are either one, immediately useful for the party, or useful in the near future.
See, I'm totally the opposite. I like ones that seem completely non-useful, at least immediately, but are still very powerful. For example, like a magic item that immediately can turn, 6 gallons of water into acid. And there's no save, there's no nothing. It just does that. And there are no limits to it. So if someone thinks out of the box, they say, hey, hang on a minute. This guy's made of water. I'm just going to turn all of his water and his blood into acid. And it works. And then the item goes, and that one guy suddenly becomes acid. Yeah, just sort of small things like that, making use of items in creative ways is something that I just like really love. Of course, it doesn't always work out. And you are right. There are items that should be fairly plain and easy to use and consistent. So that otherwise, we won't get sort of attached to them.
Yeah. So my issue with it is sometimes if you create one-use magic items that aren't immediately or in the near future useful, you'll have this situation where it's almost like the Skyrim potion fallacy, where you'll have 1,000 potions in your inventory and you'll never use them.
Yeah.
And so at least that's my approach.
That should be something that we come across an old adventurer, and in his house there's just this enormous health potion collection.
Added to the notes. It's going in the
just like this bank vault of health potions that no one ever uses. It's not even health potions, because they're the ones we do use. It's all the other potions, like strength of 30 that no one used because they didn't want to waste it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess after that, I think we could probably talk about one thing just before we wrap up for this episode. And that is what happens to Kriem.
Oh, of course.
Now, after the party have made this deal and they've sorted out this kind of mess with the White Cloaks, they then decide that they're going to another continent to go and retrieve the sword of Huron Fairhair. The idea being, if they get the sword, they can use it to kind of kill the Dark One, free the continent of his power, and prevent whatever he's trying to do. And Thexan knows that it's on the western continent of Ariosk, which is originally where kind of the character of Huron Fairhair has his origins. And so the party then have to try and find a way to get there by boat. And the idea is that you guys go into the Kingdom of Oldorf, which is this kind of Viking-inspired Scandinavian nation that was actually like an ex-conclave or kind of colony of Huron Fairhair's original host that kind of sailed across to first fight the Dark One.
It's sort of like Vikings, but they're in the desert. So it's a little bit of a contrast.
Yeah. And so you guys arrive, and this is where you hear about this kind of fight to the death, or
I should preface that this is sort of before we travel across the sea. This is in our preparations to leave on our big journey. And Kriem finds this fighting pit, and he hasn't been talking with the rest of the party about his problems.
Yeah, so he's been getting visions repeatedly from the Dark One. Either the Dark One just calling him up in the middle of the night and going, haha, I'm going to kill your friends and family, haha, you're worthless. Or him being like, you can be powerful if you only give yourself over to me. And Kriem is not dealing well with this.
No.
And he decides, rather than talking about his problems, to do what any well-adjusted young man does and bottle up the emotions and then look for a way of proving himself to himself, but not giving anyone any context about it.
Yeah, because he had signed himself up for the fight, and then he had told the rest of us. And of course, we said, that's a terrible idea. Why have you done it? We're supposed to be leaving. And there was a sort of a time just outside the stands when we were trying to convince him not to go through with it. You know, it even to the point where Blum like turned into a bear and punched him a bit just to sort of show him that he wasn't going to make it in this fight. But he was set it. His heart was set on it. So we went to go watch, and of course he was fighting this enormous barbarian.
Yeah, it became pretty obvious pretty early on that the person he was going to fight was a hulking monstrosity, like an absolute brick shithouse of a man.
Like peak Arnold Schwarzenegger build.
Yeah, and to kind of gather information before the fight, the party tried to convince Kriem by proving to him that there was no way he'd win this.
Yeah.
There was no use of magic. In fact, it outright like expressly said on the thing,
forbid magic, which meant that he was using only his fists. And I think this was what the point that they were trying to prove outside by beating him up, is that without magic, he had no combat experience at all.
Yeah, and I think that the day before, the party had inevitably, in their own ways, each tried to gather information on who this guy was and how strong he was to try and convince him. And this is where this meme comes from, where you have like everyone going around.
So, in my defense, Blum is a burgeoning druid. You know, he doesn't have great control of his power, and he had recently learned how to talk to animals. So, naturally, he asked the creatures about his namesake, the creatures that he once hunted, the rats. You know, in his mind, the rats are everywhere. They see everything. They'll know about this guy. And of course, but I've got nothing but useless babble.
And so after that, you then have Kriem decide to enter into the fighting pit alone. And I spoke with James about this, and he's told me that he wanted to prove himself to the party that, you know, he was strong enough, and no matter what the Dark One was saying, he could beat him. He was a hero.
What Kriem hadn't understood was that the party knew Kriem was strong. They had seen him blow people up. There was no question about it. Kriem was incredibly deadly, and a valuable asset. But you know, he's a specialist. He's not martial. So when he stepped into a martial combat arena, no magic, we knew he was screwed.
Yeah, and the funny part was Kriem enters it, sees the fight going over, and then looks to the party for confidence. They believe in him.
Absolute terror on our faces.
Yeah, I asked everyone in the party to describe their facial expression, and the only person who was remotely confident or appeared confident was Holger. And that was largely because Holger didn't give a shit. And
a man whose moral compass is a roulette wheel.
Yeah. And so Kriem proceeded to get his ass kicked.
He got his ass kicked, and we were like, Blum was ready to step in. He had his bow in his hand. He was ready to fucking kill the guy in the ring and jump in to save Kriem at the last second. He had spells, I think I had readied them up. Like I was on a reaction, holding my turn. And then what happened, Chris?
Well, and then Kriem pulled out the coin from his pocket.
Fucking coin.
And he was he heard a whispering. He made a prayer and he said, "If you give me the power to defeat this enemy, I will serve you." Which is perhaps the weirdest way the Dark One has got his way, but
Yeah.
I was very happy with, because as a DM, when I get to win, that's a rarity.
Yeah, we don't often get to really. You don't really often get to snub us hard. I got to say that this was the first of many deaths that happened in what I have dubbed in a cutscene, where they didn't technically die in combat; they were killed, by narrative forces, rather unanimously. And I suppose, in a way, it wasn't a death. It straight up wasn't a death, but certainly it was a removal. He was no longer playing Kriem. That was him out of the party.
Yeah, it was a situation where it was no longer possible for Krem to be a player character, because by the very nature of accepting this deal, he was completely at odds with the rest of the party.
Yeah.
And so the Dark One accepts his bidding, of course, as he rolls rather high on a charisma persuasion check. And as he begins to levitate, the rest of the party see as he begins to kind of hover up into the ground, above the ground, about 15 feet, and then explode in a blinding white light. That kills almost everyone in the audience.
Yeah, it was the proper sort of Terminator 2 leaning at the face at the fence, and then blowing into a skeleton.
Yeah, and so that led to Krem's passing.
His demonic ascension. And forgive me if I'm wrong, sort of demonhood and possession in your world. I think we talked about it a bit, but I think you said it works similarly to how it works in something like 40K. Where, once you sort of take a demon into you, the demon replaces your own will.
Yeah. You're kind of like a passenger along for the ride. You can decide whether or not you want to kind of sit in and go again and go again and go again, or you're just there watching, locked in. So in Krem's case, he had a situation where he kind of decided to do it, and he was very much, at least at the start, I imagine, okay with the decision he'd made, because he wasn't necessarily doing horrible things the moment he became a demon.
No, there was, besides the initial sort of explosion, there wasn't really a lot of harm because he had been whisked away to some unknown place.
Yeah. But it became apparent later on that he wasn't enjoying what he was doing.
No.
Especially when it came to confrontations with the party.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise. He regretted his decision. And it came back to bite him in the ass.
Yeah. I think that is probably where we'll have to leave it, as the party then decide to get on a boat and sail towards Ariosk.
I mean, we've got a lot to talk about next time. We've got the gloves. We've got the introduction of Gud.
Yep.
And Gud's many relatives.
Yeah. We have the events in the Sea of Storms where you guys all meet a certain big kind of NPC. Then you have the arrival at Ariosk and all the shenanigans that happen within your first couple of days there.
That's right.
And
I think that was when I sort of really started to lose track of what was going on. So I'm going to be asking a lot more questions when we get into Ariosk, because I loved the scene, the setting, but my brain, at least over the sort of Discord, it was very hard to keep up with all of the names, all of the sigils, and all the houses.
Yeah.
I was getting completely lost. So I need like a whole recap, I think, of that.
So I think the biggest change was when I went to that arc, I changed the way I prep, and so I started using OneNote a lot more, which meant that I, as a DM, when I was previously just writing on paper and had to make it streamlined as possible to kind of make sure that I could remember all of it, I then had the access to OneNote, so I could add more details in, but inevitably I think I kind of flashbanged you all with way too much information too early on.
I think perhaps it would have been fine if, we had spent more time there, but, we were in a rush. This was sort of a race towards the end. We were heading straight to a different destination. So we sort of ran through it.
I think speedrunning mode.
Yeah, exactly. Given a more leisurely sort of quest, had we sort of had Greenhold at the beginning been in Ariosk, I think we probably would have gotten really integrated into that, and it would have been very, very interesting. So I think it's unlikely that we'll get there in the current campaign, but I would like to go visit it again. If we could sort of like do another journey over to Ariosk and see the different houses.
Definitely, I feel like the option is always open, and especially considering the events that happen after the campaign. There are further developments that are still there, so there's plenty of kind of meat still left on the plate.
Yeah. Right. Well, shall we call it there? I mean, how long has it been?
I think we've been going for I think about an hour or so.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's probably where we will call it. But yeah, please, again, we'll appreciate any feedback. And thank you so much for your guys' time, and take care.
Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you very much, Seb, for listening to this drivel.
But yeah, take care. Bye,
Take care.